Die 1362-1389. 16. The Caliphate was officially transferred from the Mamluks to Ottoman Sultanate in 1517, whose members were recognized as caliphs until the office's abolition on 3 March 1924 by the Republic of Turkey, and the exile of the last caliph, Abdulmecid II, to France. Christianity and Judaism. In accordance with the Muslim dhimmi system, the Ottoman Empire guaranteed limited freedoms to Christians, Jews, and other people of the book, such as the right to worship, own property, and be exempt from the obligatory alms, zakat, required of Muslims. However, non-Muslims, or dhimmi, were subject to various legal restrictions, including being forbidden to carry weapons, ride on horseback, or have their homes overlook those of Muslims. Likewise, they were required to pay higher taxes than Muslim subjects, including the jizya, which was a key source of state revenue. 242. 243. Many Christians and Jews converted to Islam to secure full social and legal status, though most continued to practice their faith without restriction. Mehmed the Conqueror and Patriarch Gennadius I the Ottomans developed a unique socio-political system known as Pemilit, which granted non-Muslim communities a large degree of political, legal, and religious autonomy. In essence, members of a millet were subjects of the empire but not subject to the Muslim faith or Islamic law. A millet could govern its own affairs, such as raising taxes and resolving internal legal disputes, with little or no interference from Ottoman authorities, so long as its members were loyal to the Sultan and adhered to rules concerning dhimmi. A quintessential example is the ancient Orthodox community of Mount Athos, which was permitted to retain its autonomy and was never subject to occupation or forced conversion. Even special laws were enacted to protect it from outsiders. 244. The Rum Millet, which encompassed most Eastern Orthodox Christians, was governed by the Byzantine-era Corpus Juris Civilis, Code of Justinian, with the Ecumenical Patriarch designated the highest religious and political authority, millet-bashi, or ethnic. Likewise, Ottoman Jews came under the authority of the Hahamba, or Ottoman chief rabbi, while Armenians were under the authority of the chief bishop of the Armenian Apostolic Church. 245. As the largest group of non-Muslim subjects, the Rum Millet enjoyed several special privileges in politics and commerce. However, Jews and Armenians were also well represented among the wealthy merchant class, as well as in public administration. 246. 247. Some modern scholars consider the millet system to be an early example of religious pluralism, as it accorded minority religious groups official recognition and tolerance. 248. Social political religious structure. Ethnic map of the Ottoman Empire in 1917. Black equals Bulgars and Turks, red equals Greeks, light yellow equals Armenians, blue equals Kurds, orange equals Lazars, dark yellow equals Arabs, green equals Nestorians. Beginning in the early 19th century, society, government, and religion were interrelated in a complex, overlapping way that was deemed inefficient by Atatürk, who systematically dismantled it after 1922. 249. 250. In Constantinople, the Sultan ruled two distinct domains, the secular government and the religious hierarchy. Religious officials formed the ulama, who had control of religious teachings and theology, and also the empire's judicial system, giving them a major voice in day-to-day affairs in communities across the empire, but not including the non-Muslim millets. They were powerful enough to reject the military reforms proposed by Sultan Selim III. His successor Sultan Mahmud II, R1808-1839, first won ulama approval before proposing similar reforms. 251. The secularization program brought by Atatürk ended the ulama and the institutions. The caliphate was abolished, madrasas were closed down, and the Sharia courts were abolished. He replaced the Arabic alphabet with Latin letters, ended the religious school system, and gave women some political rights. Many rural traditionalists never accepted this secularization, and by the 1990s they were reasserting a demand for a larger role for Islam. 252. The Janissaries were a highly formidable military unit in the early years, but as Western Europe modernized its military organization technology, the Janissaries became a reactionary force that resisted all change. Steadily the Ottoman military power became outdated, but when the Janissaries felt their privileges were being threatened, or outsiders wanted to modernize them, or they might be superseded by the cavalrymen, they rose in rebellion. The rebellions were highly violent on both sides, but by the time the Janissaries were the original church of Saint Anthony of Padua, Istanbul, was built in 1725. Both local Italian community of Istanbul. Suppressed, it was far too late for Ottoman military power to catch up with the West. 253, 254. The political system was transformed with destruction of the Janissaries, a powerful military /governmental /police force, which revolted in the auspicious incident of 1826. Sultan Mahmud II crushed the revolt, executed the leaders and disbanded the large organization. That set a stage for a slow process of modernization of government functions, as the government sought, with mixed success, to adopt humane elements of Western bureaucracy and military technology. The Janissaries had been recruited from Christians and other minorities. Their abolition enabled the emergence of a Turkish elite to control the Ottoman Empire. A large number of ethnic and religious minorities were tolerated in their own separate segregated domains called millets. 255. They were primarily Greek, Armenian or Jewish. In each locality, they governed themselves, spoke their own language, ran their own schools, cultural and religious institutions, and paid somewhat higher taxes. They had no power outside the millet. The imperial government protected them and prevented major violent clashes between ethnic groups. Ethnic nationalism, based on distinctive religion and language, provided a centripetal force that eventually destroyed the Ottoman Empire. 256. In addition, Muslim ethnic groups, which were not part of the millet system, especially the Arabs and the Kurds, were outside the Turkish culture and developed their own separate nationalism. The British sponsored Arab nationalism in the First World War, promising an independent Arab state in return for Arab support. Most Arabs supported the Sultan, but those near Mecca believed in and supported the British promise. 257. Hemdat Israel Synagogue of Istanbul. At the local level, power was held beyond the control of the Sultan by the ayans or local notables. The ayan collected taxes, formed local armies to compete with other notables, took a reactionary attitude toward political or economic change, and often defied policies handed down by the Sultan. 258. After the 18th century, the Ottoman Empire was shrinking, as Russia put on heavy pressure and expanded to its south. Egypt became effectively independent in 1805, and the British later took it over, along with Cyprus. Greece became independent, and Serbia and other Balkan areas became highly restive as the force of nationalism pushed against imperialism. The French took over Algeria and Tunisia. The Europeans all out that the empire was a sick man in rapid decline. Only the Germans seemed helpful, and their support led to the Ottoman Empire joining the Central Powers in 1915, with the result that they came out as one of the heaviest losers of the First World War in 1918. 259. Culture. The Ottomans absorbed some of the traditions, art, and institutions of cultures in the regions they conquered and added new dimensions to them. Numerous traditions and cultural traits of previous empires, in fields such as architecture, cuisine, music, leisure, and government, were adopted by the Ottoman Turks, who depiction of a hookah shop in Lebanon developed them into new forms, resulting in a new and distinctively Ottoman cultural identity. Although the predominant literary language of the Ottoman Empire was Turkish, Persian was the preferred vehicle for the projection of an imperial image. 260. Slavery was part of Ottoman society. 261, with most slaves employed as domestic servants. Agricultural slavery, like that in the Americas, was relatively rare. Unlike systems of chattel slavery, slaves under Islamic law were not regarded as movable property, and the children of female slaves were born legally free. Female slaves were still sold in the empire as late as 1908. 262. During the 19th century, the empire came under pressure from Western European countries to outlaw the practice. Policies developed by various sultans throughout the 19th century attempted to curtail the Ottoman slave trade, but slavery had centuries of religious backing and sanction, and so was never abolished in the empire. 245. Plague remained a major scourge in Ottoman society until the second quarter of the 19th century. Between 1701 and 1750, 37 larger and smaller plague epidemics were recorded in Istanbul, and 31 between 1751 and 1801. 263. Ottomans adopted Persian bureaucratic traditions and culture. The sultans also made an important contribution in the development of Persian literature. 264. Language was not an obvious sign of group connection and identity in the 16th century among the rulers of Ottoman Empire, Safavid Iran and Abu el-Qarid Shaybanids of Central Asia. 265. Hence the ruling classes of all three polities were bilingual in varieties of Persian and Turkic. 265. But in the century's final quarter, linguistic adjustments occurred in the Ottoman and Safavid realms, defined by a new rigidity that favored Ottoman Turkish and Persian, respectively. 265. Education. The Buyazd State Library was founded in 1884. In the Ottoman Empire, each millet established a schooling system serving its members. 266. Education was therefore largely divided on ethnic and religious lines. Few non-Muslims attended schools for Muslim students, and vice versa. Most institutions that served all ethnic and religious groups taught in French or other languages. 267. Several foreign schools, Frula Mekteberai, operated by religious clergy, primarily served Christians, although some Muslim students attended. 266. Garnett described the schools for Christians and Jews as organized upon European models, with voluntary contributions supporting their operation, and most of them were Latin-did and with a high standard of education. 268. Literature. The two primary streams of Ottoman written literature are poetry and prose. Poetry was by far the dominant stream. Until the 19th century, Ottoman prose did not contain any examples of fiction. There were no counterparts to, for instance, the European romance, short story, or novel. Analog genres did exist, though. In both Turkish folk literature and in divan poetry. Ottoman divan poetry was a highly ritualized and symbolic art form. From the Persian poetry that largely inspired it, it inherited a wealth of symbols whose meanings and interrelationships, both of similitude, mura at nazir / tenor sub, and opposition, tezid, were more or less prescribed. Divan poetry was composed through the constant juxtaposition of many such images within a strict metrical framework, allowing numerous potential meanings to emerge. The vast majority of divan poetry was lyrics in nature, either ghazals, which make up the greatest part of the repertoire of the tradition, or qasides. But were other common genres, especially the menevi, a kind of verse romance and thus a variety of narrative poetry. The two most notable examples of this form are the Lili and Majnun of Fuzuli and the Huzn You Ask of Sigalab. The Syahatnam of Evliya Celebi, 1611-1682, is an outstanding example of travel literature. Ahmet Nedim Efendi, one of most celebrated Ottoman poets until the 19th century. Ottoman prose did not develop to the extent that contemporary divan poetry did. A large part of the reason was that much prose was expected to adhere to the rules of Sek, also transliterated as Sisai, or rhymed prose. 269, a type of writing descended from the Arabic such that prescribed that between each adjective and noun in a string of words such as a sentence, there must be a rhyme. Nevertheless, there was a tradition of prose in the literature of the time, though it was exclusively non-fictional. One apparent exception was Muhayalat, Fancies, by Gayretli Ali Aziz Effendi, a collection of stories of the fantastic written in 1796 though not published until 1867. The first novel published in the Ottoman Empire was Vatan Pasha's 1851 The Story of Akabi, Turkish, Akabi Hikayesi. It was written in Turkish but with Armenian script. 270, 271, 272, 273. Due to historically close ties with France, French literature constituted the major Western influence on Ottoman literature in the latter half of the 19th century. As a result, many of the same movements prevalent in France during this period had Ottoman equivalents in the developing Ottoman prose tradition. For instance, the influence of Romanticism can be seen during the Tanzimat period, and that of the realist and naturalist movements in subsequent periods. In the poetic tradition, on the other hand, the influence of the symbolist and Parnassian movements was paramount. Many of the writers in the Tanzimat period wrote in several different genres. Simultaneously, for instance, the poet Namd Kamal also wrote the important 1876 novel Mtib, Awakening, while the journalist Brahim Sanazi is noted for writing, in 1860, the first modern Turkish play, the one-act comedy Serevlenmesi, The Poet's Marriage. An earlier play, a farce titled Vaki Asid Ve Havadaz Igerab Yukifsja Ahmed, The Strange Events and Bizarre Occurrences of the Cobbler Ahmed, dates from the beginning of the 19th century, but there is doubt about its authenticity. In a similar vein, the novelist Ahmed Miyat Effendi wrote important novels in each of the major movements: Romanticism, Hasan Melihab Srindi Esra, 1873, Hasan the Sailor, or The Mystery Within the Mystery, Realism, Hanazon Yidi Anda, 1881, just 17 years old, and Naturalism, Muzahidat, 1891, Observations. This diversity was, in part, due to Tanzimat writers' wish to disseminate as much of the new literature as possible, in the hope that it would contribute to a revitalization of Ottoman social structures. 274. Media. The media of the Ottoman Empire was diverse, with newspapers and journals published.
Yes, we need to stop because the power is out. We have the news in 5 minutes. We need to split in a few seconds. I will report this camcorder. So